Welcome to Travel Devil. I'm your host, Clara Francken, and in a world full of mass tourism, we're here to talk about unconventional travel. Let's get into it. Welcome to Travel Devil. Today we are talking about the popular vacation destination, Portugal, and how we can visit this country in a more sustainable way. I'm here today, not alone, but with Marta Domingues. Marta, you are the founder of the eco project Floresta des Libres. Welcome to Travel Devil.
Thank you, Clara. Woohoo! I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. And you're also a biodiversity activist, and you are living in Portugal, which is perfect for this subject. Can you introduce yourself in your own words?
Yeah, I'm Marta. No one ever called me before biodiversity activist, but that just makes it make so much sense. I'm the founder of a project. I'm a mama and I'm an activist sometimes when I see something wrong.
Amazing. And I'm so happy to have you on this podcast because I think we're going to learn a lot from you and your insights today. I also wanted to get into a little bit more of your background with traveling, just to get to know you a little bit better. What is your background in traveling? Did you travel a lot as a kid?
A little bit as a kid, mostly exploring Portugal, a lot of rural tourism. Then as a younger adult, I traveled a little bit, but more like long journeys. So I didn't go to many places, but stayed for a few months in places like India, Greece. The UK was a much longer stay of 9 years. I'm forgetting something. Oh yeah, that was the road trip in 2019 from UK to Greece. That was probably the biggest travel of the life yet.
Yeah, and what I also like to do is to go a little bit deeper, further away from today and back to you when you were a kid, when you were younger. Can you explain to us when your passion for green adventure started, and did you care much about sustainability as a kid already?
Yeah, as a kid, I just always loved being in nature, observing animals. So I always had that appreciation, I guess. And I would always love to go on little adventures in the forest. I have some very vivid memories of what the forest was then, and the forests around here to what they are now.
You're talking about the forest and everything. Did you grow up in a rural area or then in the city?
Just rural, yeah. It's near Leiria, Portugal, in the Silver Coast area.
Okay, amazing.
It's quite in the countryside.
Your family always lived already around the countryside then? So when you were young, you were also there as well?
Yeah. And I was blessed to spend so many summers with my grandmother. She was always out farming and looking after animals. And she was just this amazing person who cared for everyone and lived as simply as she could. She saved every little plastic bag, reused everything, made like her own utensils and tools and things like that. And she's a great inspiration. And as well, my great grandmother, who was the first person to live where I am now, and that I got the forest from, I suppose, the forest that I now steward. And it's really nice to have those roots.
Yeah, that sounds like a sustainable lifestyle before sustainability was a hot topic.
Yeah, you were just poor, so you made things do, you know. that was like in the back scene for a lot of the people here, but now I appreciate it with such different light. And it's so cool that was not cool back then, but it's now. That's really cool, you know.
Yes, that's amazing. That's amazing. And so when you were a kid, you already had a lot of experiences with sustainability. Now you're a mom yourself. Do you still feel like sustainability is a big part of your life?
100%. I think unless you are living in a rock or you really don't want to see like the eco anxiety, everything that's going wrong with the world, it's just in your face. It's been in our faces for for a decade now, I guess, I've started to worry about what's going to happen to the future. And when you have kids, that hits you like in a whole different level, because you always want to be the best parent you can and protect them. But how can you protect them from everything that's going on? So it's been maybe the biggest part for me of my process as a mom is to try to give my best example to them in how we should all be living a little bit slower, with a little bit less. And I guess that's where my project comes to be, trying to just be a good parent and a good example for my kids, and doing everything I feel is in my power to just contribute into things being better, or at least do no harm. What can you do
Yeah,
here that will not going to harm?
amazing. Yeah, yeah. And you're talking about your project. Could you explain a little bit more about that project? It's in Portugal as well, I guess.
It's right here in my family land that I inherited after coming back. And with COVID and everything, I swear like the land just started speaking to me. And, the project is just trying to use the land the best way I can to enrich it, to do no harm. I welcome people as campers. I host events. I'm reforesting. I'm experimenting with how we can face really bad droughts, for example, which we've had over the last 3 years. And there's a lot of experimenting going on with the reforestation part. Then I'm also monitoring biodiversity. I'm learning everything I can about identifying species, being fauna, flora, fungi.
Yeah, it sounds like you're using your land the best way possible to make the land better and to also make an impact. That sounds amazing. I would love to camp at your place one day.
For sure. Thank you, Clara.
That would be amazing.
I'm trying. And I think it's always evolving, especially as we learn more.
Yeah, of course. And then last questions before we get into the topic of Portugal, what we actually want to talk about today is you call yourself an activist. Could you explain to me what that means for you?
To me, it just means if you see something wrong, you talk about it. You maybe talk about it so more people will know about it. You really try to spread that message. Because maybe what if you're the only one that noticed it? I feel it's a little bit everyone. It's like if you pass a piece of rubbish, maybe you should be the one to pick it up. And in Portugal, I can't complain of how much things that need to be spoken about, and there's just not enough. I'm joking, obviously. I wish it wasn't like that. Being here, you have to be an activist.
I'm looking forward to diving into that subject a little bit more. So let's talk about Portugal, right? Portugal is a very popular destination, but do you feel that when you're living there?
Yeah, especially for me, I was away for 10 years almost. The difference is just, you cannot not see it. And I myself, I avoid going to a lot of places now in certain times of the year, or even at all. I don't go to Lisbon at all these days because it's just too chaotic. Traffic, for example, it's just very chaotic. If I need to go, I'll go in a bus or something.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any numbers you can share or examples?
Yeah, well, tourism has just been growing exponentially. There was in 2006, there was 7 million tourist entries in Portugal. There's now over 30 million. Our population is only about 10 million, so consider that we're getting double, sometimes more. And last year, for example, it was something like 77 million individual stays in Portugal in a whole year. And again, considering we're just 10 million, it's a big investment for the government as well. So it's just, it keeps growing. There was an ad recently in Times Square, which is crazy to me that Times Square has images of Portugal coast. It feels quite surreal, especially when that coast is being destroyed a lot in terms of natural values. But that's the activists talking.
And what are people attracted to when they're going to Portugal? What are the stuff that people are attracted to? Why do they want to come to Portugal?
I think it's a lot the weather. The heat in the summer, the nice temperature, but then always Portugal was known for the hospitality, how kind people were when welcoming, how the atmosphere in cafes and restaurants was, and then the rich history. There's history in every corner that you go in the country, and the good food, of course, the Mediterranean diet, the nice seafood from the sea. So I think this combo and the cheap prices up to a few years ago just makes Portugal very desirable. And then after tourism, for expat living as well, which is one of the consequences of all this increased tourism here.
Yeah. And when I think about Portugal, I always think about the waves as well, and like people who go to Portugal for surfing. Do you think that's also a big part of the tourism?
It's starting to be now, but it wasn't. That's been in the
Ah,
last decade or so. And I actually live very close by to this rare spot in the world, even. There's only 2 more spots like this with giant waves of over 100 feet. And there's been some Guinness ones. There's amazing documentaries about this and the transformation of this town because of surf tourism mostly. It's something else. But it's maybe a more sustainable example than what's going on in places like Lisbon or Porto.
could you share a story about an experience that you had, that you saw firsthand how the tourism really affected the country or the population?
Last year, I tried to go on a mini holiday to the most popular coast, other than Algarve, in Portugal, which is just south of Lisbon. I won't share the name. So, if you share too much, then it gets even worse. But basically, we wanted to just try to check this really beautiful turquoise water beach. And the roads are not very good. They're not prepared for this kind of tourism. So we ended up not understanding what was going on and getting on a queue until we were there a while until we could actually get to a point where we could turn back. So the whole experience was being stuck in the queue for 3 hours in total. Couldn't turn around. We couldn't go anywhere because people just kept on coming to see this beautiful beach that you cannot even go to. You just see it from above. But it was the peak of August. And yeah, that was like really hot, 3 hours with the kids in the car. It was mental. And you see everyone around. We just want to see this beach, but yeah, you just see each other frustrated in a queue. I think I thought to myself, this is too much. It's just too much.
Yeah, it's also kind of sad when you're saying like, oh, you don't live so far away from the beach, and like Portugal, it's not a super big country, so you should, like, thinking back to you when you were kids, probably the beach looked very different, and there was not a queue to see the beach. So I can imagine taking your kids there was like maybe eye-opening in a bad way.
Definitely avoid these places in high season. That's try to go in low season. It's still, even though the tourism here is kind of being all year round now, and there's other high seasons throughout the year. In the winter, or whatever winter looks like here now, there's no proper winter anymore. It should be quieter. So if you really want to see these places, like, maybe choose these times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, I really want to talk about solutions for all the problems of over tourism that Portugal faces. But I'm also interested in knowing a little bit more, what are the problems? What are the problems that Portugal is facing now with over tourism?
So I think this history of mine is a big one. The overcrowding of places that sometimes can be public places, beaches that are really at capacity, and even to a dangerous point where authorities, if something were to happen, they don't have any emergency, any brawl, something like that. They don't have conditions to actually prevent it from being worse. The roads. And then it's not just external tourism, it's internal tourism as well, so that adds to the equation. Portugal is getting more popular to the Portuguese as well, so the traffic is just impossible at certain times. But I guess the bigger problem, it's the impact in housing. Places like Lisbon, Algarve, Porto are now mostly completely inaccessible Portuguese people. And even finding people to work in the cities now is hard because of that problem. Either companies can really support people to pay higher prices for accommodation, or they're struggling to get staff now. And with this, you had a lot of people being evicted by landlords, elderly people going through really difficult times. Obviously, not enough or at all government support for this kind of situations. It's just kind of exploding with no regulation whatsoever from the government.
And does that also mean that a lot of Portuguese people are leaving and a lot of expats are coming in?
Some. There's actually on the younger population, a lot of youngsters don't feel like the country is hopeful, I guess. So they're going abroad for studies, for living. That is happening a lot. But the Portuguese people are going more inland. They're getting more away from the coast, from the popular places, from Lisbon, from Porto town centers. And the expats are moving in. The expats and the tourism accommodations, of course, there's both. But this together has caused like the housing prices to really like go on a massive increase. It's been like 4-time increase over 10 years or something. So now accommodation is really inaccessible to rent, to buy anywhere. And banks are not always your friends.
Pretty bad actually for the Portuguese people. You mentioned before that you were traveling by car to go to the seaside. I imagine you took the car because there's no good public transport, or am I taking wrong conclusions? How is the public transport in Portugal like?
In general, the infrastructure across the board is really bad. The trains are almost non-existent. You have intercity trains, not intercity, like just for the city and suburbia. Those ones used to work okay. Now they're getting overcrowded with people that had to move away from Lisbon now have to use. There's not enough trains. The buses was good as well, but now it's starting to have that as well. There's been lots of strikes from those departments, the transport departments. The roads, there's been improvement, but if you go inland, then the roads are also like mostly not in a good state. The general panorama is bad in Portugal in terms of public transport. I myself, I cannot go anywhere in the area. I don't have any public transport in my area. I need to walk 2 kilometers or something to have it. I have 2 buses. No, I'm lying. I have 2 buses a day here, one to go and one to come back in the end of the day.
Okay, so if you miss your bus, then you're fucked.
Okay, yeah. And the next stop where there's maybe a few more options, maybe 3 more options throughout the day, it's like 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers walk.
Wow. Okay, that's
Yeah. But I was saying the thing that works okay is the intercity buses. They're fast, not too expensive, comfortable enough. I don't recommend it for long travels in the summer, like 5-hour travels, but for 2 hours, it's okay. But then if you go inland, which is what a lot of people should do, really, you have the buses to the main city centers, but then you don't have like any transport for like the little villages and things like that. That just doesn't exist, unfortunately.
okay. So basically, also when you're visiting Portugal, I was wondering for tourists who are coming to visit Portugal, they will arrive probably in a bigger city. And how is that for them then to use a public transport? Because yes, they can use the intercity buses, which are good, you said. But besides that, is there something else that they can use to see a little bit more of the country besides the touristic hotspots? Or is that just also made very difficult for tourists because of the infrastructure and they need to rent out a car?
I guess you could do it like with a bicycle. If you're, used to doing that kind of thing and love to doing that kind of thing inland, you can use a bicycle. But otherwise, yeah, if you want to see like more of the countryside, it would be very hard to do with public transport. There's not enough connections. And if you want to go to the little villages, usually there's nothing at all. There's no public transport. Maybe getting a lift or something would be your public transport there. And people tend to help each other a lot, so maybe that's an option. And I really encourage you to try in Portugal and see what you can discover, because this is the perspective of someone who's living in a certain area and who reads the papers and this and that. But there's always things that we don't know about. So I'd love for you to do this, to watch you do this, and see if there's something you can discover about Portugal.
Yes, I'd love to discover that too. I really want to go to Portugal. For me, I guess my problem is that I want to go to Portugal with public transport, and it seems like the train lines are not so helpful. And I'm going to be sitting in the bus for quite some time. So I'm going to see how I will manage that, or find solutions that are more comfortable than sitting many, many hours in the summer in the bus.
Yeah, it's a good trip if you want to do something slow for a while, I think. Otherwise, not very practical at the moment.
And now we talked a little bit about the problemos we've got there, but can you also share some solutions that we have for us little eco-loving travelers who still want to see Portugal, but who also are mindful of this over-tourism, and we want to still see the country? So what can we do? What can we visit? What can we look out for? What are the solutions for eco-friendly traveling in Portugal?
There's a lot of things happening that are more sustainable. So for Portugal and anywhere really, I would always stay away from the big brands, from the big hotels and companies and franchises. And wherever you go, try to support something that is a family business, a smaller business, someone that is really part of the community, and not just someone who's just cashing in the checks for their tourism, entrepreneurship, or something. And with Portugal specifically, I think just look out for other options. Of course, with the travel, there has to be a compromise if you want to see the rural and cultural side, more inland. But coming with a group of friends and sharing a car, renting a car and sharing that, I think that's a pretty cool option. And Portugal is really lovely to explore with a group of people. And there's so many different places. If you go inland from the south to the north, you just see the landscape and the culture change as you go. And definitely very different from what you see in Lisbon and Porto. Not that it doesn't have its charm, but can you really enjoy something when you're stuck in queues and you want to go see the monuments, the big ones in Portugal, but then you're just stuck there staring at it and you cannot really see anything properly. I think people should question that and look for more nature and grounding experiences, trying the local foods, even going to cultural events. So I think that's a way people can enjoy more.
Yeah. Do you have examples of fun projects or communities that people could visit, which is more inland, for example?
Yeah. If you search on Google, you find so many examples. Just look for rural tourism Portugal or sustainable tourism. But one I'd really like to share about is this village in the Lausanne mountain range, which is a small mountain range, not far away from the coast, and quite a different nature setting in terms of richness. And this project restored the whole village. This is a special village made where the houses are made with xisto stone. It's a very nice kind of stone, and it's everywhere. Everything is made of it. And they made it an artist's village. And now the whole tourism concept there is based on retreats for people to learn skills like pottery or painting, or even foresting, ecology. So there's a lot going on into that village and places like that. There's really amazing farms who offer rural tourism as well. And sometimes, depending on these places, they can even offer some options in terms of picking you up from the bigger city or something like that. So there's places like that. You just gotta try to stay away from the other ones and look out for these ones. Places for everybody.
Do you think, you were talking about Google, do you think we can also look at, for example, Google reviews to know if a place is good or bad? Or are people on reviews not really complaining about these kind of issues? Do you think that's also a benchmark people can look out for?
Yeah, definitely a good idea. But don't just go for it, because many reviews, especially on the bigger companies now, can be like kind of fake. But it's good to have a look at what in general people are saying. Sometimes things will repeat, but in a different way. So you see that's a common issue or something. And in a lot of the big places, the service is really not so good. You tend to get treated much better the more small and smaller places and smaller businesses you go to, I guess. But one good way to get good recommendations is go on Facebook groups with anything sustainability and tourism in Portugal. I think it's an excellent way to find people that maybe even are not on big websites or anything like that. Like my project, I'm hosting people in vans and campers in a very ecological stay, but I'm not in the main places. So people have to look. We're on Facebook groups a lot, for example. And searching Google, going inland and searching for accommodation options, you get a lot of things popping up. That's also a good way.
Yeah. When we're talking about Facebook groups, what kind of keywords am I typing in to find interesting groups? Is it like Sustainable Travel Portugal? Or is it just like Portugal Travel? Or what am I typing in here?
I would try all of those. There's many different groups and with different themes. There is rural tourism Portugal. There's wild Portugal. There's travel Portugal. I'm sure there's a travel sustainable Portugal. And then in these groups, just ask your questions, ask for your recommendations, maybe share about the things that you're worried about. And usually people contribute a lot. And this is how you get to know maybe of things that are not so easily found. Then searching on Google, if you just type sustainable travel Portugal, there's lots of small businesses and alternative companies that come up. I found a few, like one had a really cute name. It was a small farm stays Portugal, something like that. So there's options. Yeah, I think those are the main keywords: sustainability and rural tourism. And obviously searching Google Maps as well. Like if you search a specific area and you just type like accommodation, everything that is possible through the main channels will be there.
Yeah. I also wanted to share a tip from my side about using Google Maps, for example, is some people are receptive for feedback and some people are not. And I think if there's a negative feedback on Google Maps about some company, and then they reply that they're listening to it and they will work on it, or they will create more awareness, or they're just answering in a way that they're acknowledging the problem and that they're willing to find a solution, then you can still go to these kind of places. What I would always look out for is definitely when you're giving criticism or somebody else just gave criticism and basically they're explaining why this criticism is untrue. And then you're reading another review, which is also negative. And then there's again saying how the problem is with the person writing the review and not the problem is laying in their hands. And I think that's where you can see that there's problems, structural problems within. And in those places, I always try to avoid to go, for me.
Yeah, 100%. Just because it's a small business, it doesn't mean that it's going to be good. But I agree with what you said. Looking out for what people are saying always gives you an insight into what it's all about, really.
Yeah, and even TripAdvisor as well, right? So we talked about Google Maps and Facebook groups. I also think TripAdvisor is a great one.
Yeah,
Okay, I also wanted to ask you a little bit more about other solutions. So we talked about going more inland, we talked about seeing more projects in communities, um, seeing more real nature. Is there anything else that a tourist can do when they're visiting Portugal?
I think, just try to support community everywhere you can. Um, Look up the places and the experiences before you go, so you don't add to the overcrowdedness. And it's occurring to me as well. One issue that we've had with van travelers, which is a mostly sustainable way of traveling, is overcrowding in certain places and destroying nature or littering. So whether you're traveling in a van with a specific problem, try to take that into account. But whether you're traveling anywhere, just be accountable for your rubbish, for how much you're using on your trip. I think that's a big part of travel nowadays as well, is people tend to use so much more when they're traveling than what they would normally, things they don't even normally need. So account for that as well.
Yeah, I think there the tagline, try to leave the place a better place than how it looked like when you arrived, is a good one to hold on to for everybody, also for van life or for camping people and for everybody. This is just something that we have to all be mindful of because, yeah, I didn't even think about that. But of course, if everybody is putting their tent in the same place or everybody is putting their camper, they're all going to the same locations, which are hotspots because they're recommended. Then, okay, if you're doing that, that's one thing. But if you're then saying like, oh, but there's already trash on the ground, like why would I pick up my own trash because there's already trash? Then it starts to become an issue. No, because when you see the trash on the ground, you should pick it up because somebody else didn't. You should not add more to that.
And I think we need to be more mindful. And as hopefully tourism drifts away from the big cities and becomes more into nature, definitely we need to cultivate this respect. And if you see a place that is very overcrowded, maybe don't go there. Maybe search for an alternative. We're a small country, but we're also a big enough country for the time being. So I trust there's always an alternative. And many more people like me are opening up their lands to different use. So there's a lot of options of just places that you can camp or that you have a little house to rent or that you can stay on your van. And it's finding them and being creative with your planning, I guess.
Yeah. And I also had another question, actually referring a little bit to what we were talking about earlier about the reviews. One thing is like putting a bad review for a company, big or small, that you had a bad experience with, but that's gonna be a small solution. Is there a bigger thing we can do to reach more people and to make a statement if we see stuff happening that we are not aligned with as tourists?
Yeah, definitely. And it feels very timely as well, because even I think tourism here has gotten so bad that even tourists are now complaining of how overcrowded it is. And residents are in some places, demanding urgent changes to the amount of tourists being allowed. So I think when people are seeing these kind of scenarios, they should write to the people in charge. Luckily, they are interested in hearing from people, but just I don't think they hear enough. And there's a page within the Visit Portugal, the tourism official site, where you can leave your suggestion or your complaint. You can share that as well, right, Clara?
Yes, yes, yes. I can share that. I will put it in the show notes. So if you can give me the email address or whatever, it is where, or the websites where people could go on to file a complaint, I guess. It's filing a complaint or it's just like sharing your thoughts?
It can be all of it. They actually say it's a form for a complaint, a suggestion, or a compliment.
Okay. And why do you think the Portuguese government would care about what tourists have to say about their country?
Well, I think they want tourism to work economically. It's just representing a big part of how we can hold on as a country. financially, so they want to protect that. And as with everything, we need to reflect what people are saying, what people want. Otherwise, that always takes a different timeline to create the action, to create the changes that is needed. When people are more direct into what they, like I said, if you see something wrong, talk about it. Things change faster. It's just how it goes. And I think especially from tourists, their opinion is valued because they're bringing in the money. It's just how the government sees it. They're more likely to do something about it.
Okay, so you think it does make sense, because when I'm traveling to a country, my first idea will never be to be like, okay, I'm gonna file a complaint and send it to the government. It would be like, oh, I'm pissed off and I'm gonna write a 1-star review on Google Maps because I didn't like the fact that I had to wait for 3 hours to get to see one building for 10 minutes and then paid an overprice. And I wouldn't think about even contacting government. So that's really valuable information, I think, to know for us all. I guess this can even be applied to more countries. I never thought about this, but it sounds very smart. When you put it like that and you say like, yes, of course, they need tourism. They need things to work. So if it's not working and tourists are complaining, yeah, maybe they will change something. Maybe it takes some time, but I can imagine when you're explaining it like that, that's, yes, they will hear it.
It depends if enough of us decide to do that. And but it can be really important, even for small businesses. This is the tourism one, but there's another one that you can write a complaint. It's open for Portuguese and for tourists about any other business. And say you've seen something wrong that can even be not like health and safety wise in a restaurant or cafe. You should report this because maybe someone will get sick from eating there or something if people notice but don't say nothing. And I think this is important to keep places as well working properly. And many are taking advantage of the tourism and sometimes maybe not having proper care. Even with numbers in hotels and events, like this health and safety part, why people take 3 hours in a row. This is a government should take more care in protecting people, because say there's a fire that can happen in the summer in Portugal, those people can be threatened just because they're in that road, right? So yeah, people should speak about everything. Maybe don't use the word activist. It's even for me is very strong, but you should always contribute for things to be better.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something else as well. Like, we're talking about all of these problems that tourists have. Still, there's so many expats coming to Portugal. Like, what is, besides the nice weather and friendly people, making Portugal so attractive? Is there like a tax benefit or something? Or what is there another reason besides just beautiful weather to go to Portugal?
There's been a lot of tax incentives, and there's been as well a program. I'm not sure of what status now because it's been back and forth in the last year. We've changed politics a lot because of the external pressure in our government from companies and from government. So now we'll see what that brings. But there was this law that people could get a visa, a Portuguese visa that gives you access to Europe straight away if they just buy a $500,000 home in Portugal, which this is standard prices for many countries like the US, Switzerland, Canada, UK. For many of these places, this is like a cheap house price. So that is attracting a lot of people, and Portuguese people cannot afford it. In general, we can afford, the average Portuguese can afford like something like 200,000. And this is what's happening to the housing market. It's very, very, very few places or houses with not so good conditions that are at this price. Everything else is just like $500,000 upwards anywhere in the country now.
Yeah, that sounds that sounds really bad. And I'm also wondering, because I'm a person that really likes to, when I'm going somewhere, I want to integrate. Like, even when I'm only there for like a couple of let's say I'm there for more than a week, I will try to learn the language because I just feel like it's important to be able to speak with the local people. Do you feel like the expats are also trying to contribute in a positive way, be it with language or by doing other things, to have a better future for Portugal?
Many are, and thank God for them. I wish every expat that comes and lives here really embraces that part. And you have many projects, even nature projects, that are being started by foreigners, expats that decided to live here, fell in love, and want to protect this land, even so much more than some Portuguese people. But the reality is that many are not. Even the language part, you have like these hotspots where it's just like little UK or little USA, and you don't even hear Portuguese anymore. This is happening. And some people that come, they take refuge in these places because the adaptation for them is easier. But I wish it was different. And so tourism and moving to a country would be really sustainable, and people just make these connections and support what's going on.
Okay. But it's also really nice to hear that there's many expats that also are trying to make it a better place. Like when they're doing same projects as you are, like projects to protect nature, and those things are really valuable, I think, for the mainland of Portugal. So that's really important. And who knows, maybe those expats can inspire other expats to also do the same. And yeah.
I agree. And I think we need everybody. And this is happening, for so many reasons, historical reasons even. And everything has its purpose. I think we're calling the guardians as well. Like the calling is open. So the guardians are coming. In my own spiritual approach to it.
Yeah. Okay. I want to end the conversation, or like start to end the conversation with a question. If you could convince me and my listeners who want to travel to Portugal to do it in a sustainable way, what would you do to pep talk me into traveling to Portugal in a sustainable way?
I think it's very simple. Do you want like the magazine tourism, the pretty pictures and the travel agency, or do you want like real, holistic, meaningful, connected experiences? That's it. That's your choice. My pep talk is just to give the people the options and trust them to choose well. That's it.
But what if I say, like, okay, so I want to travel to Portugal, but I also want to have my Insta-worthy pictures. Is that just not possible when you're not traveling to the famous places?
You get better pictures. That's the deal. But don't go after the ones that, it's just the mainstream everywhere. When you go inland Portugal, there's so many real pictures. That's, I was saying, like the best pictures are not in the popular places, are the places that maybe no one knows about. But don't share about those places, because then everyone goes there and they ruin it.
Of course. If you're now saying all of the unpopular places, then all of these unpopular places will become popular again. I guess that's the problem of places which are too touristic, because one way it's like, yeah, I really want to talk about other projects and communities, but then all of these other projects and communities shouldn't all of a sudden be overpopulated as well or overvisited by tourists. So I guess there we can all again count on the tips we received from you about, okay, you go on Google Maps and you type in some keywords and you just look on the map and try to find some nice places which maybe have reviews. Or I got a tip one time from a girl for a whole other podcast. It was about Belgium, and she said she's actually going on Google Maps on Earth View, and she's just looking in the area where she wants to travel, zooming in that area, and then she's just like looking around with her little mouse and looking if there's some old ruins that she can visit. And a lot of these things are just totally not famous at all, not known about. Even in Belgium, for such a small country, some of those things don't have even reviews on Google or aren't really noted. Those things you can only find if you're really actively looking for them.
Taking time and in that place, and maybe you ask someone, oh, what's nice here? And someone tells you the secret spot. This is the tourism for me.
Yeah, you're so right. We can just ask the people around us when we're traveling, we're going somewhere inland, and just be like, hey, what place should I visit? And I feel like having great pictures, we can do that everywhere. Having a great photographer, on the other hand, that's more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. That's true.
Okay, I want to end this conversation with 9 very quick speed questions. I end all of my podcast episodes with the same questions. So those answers that you will give will be very short and brief. And if you're ready, we can go.
Let's go.
All right. How old are you now?
35.
How old were you the first time you traveled to another continent?
21.
What's the longest time you've been away from home?
10 years, I guess.
Would you rather see a lot of places or get to know one place really well?
One place really well.
Would you rather save money on accommodation or pay for a good bed?
Can't choose. Depends on the day. Could be both.
What word would you teach a foreigner who wants to learn your language?
Obrigado. Yeah.
Obrigado? Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Perfect. Really perfect.
Okay. What can't you travel without?
My kids.
That's a wholesome answer. What is your favorite travel song?
Follow the Sun, maybe, by Xavier Rudd.
Okay. Now, last question. Why do you travel?
I don't really travel so much these days, but I travel in my forest. But when I do, to find something new, I guess.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on the podcast. Now, my very, very, very last question is, where can my listeners find you if they found this conversation interesting, they want to get in touch, they maybe want to learn more about your project you were mentioning before? Where can they find you?
So social media is the best place. The project is Floresta das Lebres. There's also a website, but Instagram has the most information, and I'm always available through there.
I will link it in the show notes, then people can contact you over there.
Thank you, Clara. This has been really fun and amazing, and I've been very nervous, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these important things.
I think it's really good that we talked about this, and I'm really happy that we could have this valuable information on the podcast, and maybe some other people will have some takeaways from this. And yeah, I think you talked very well and you explained yourself very well. So I'm happy you were on the podcast.
Thank you so much, my dear. And I hope to see you traveling Portugal and finding out more things through you.
This was Travel Devil, brought to you by me, your host, Clara Francken. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to continue the conversation or suggest any future guests, you can go to my Instagram, @Clara Francken. Take care, and I will see you next Thursday.